All right, good evening. I did it before I put on the mic, sorry. This is the August 16, 2023 Cottage Grove City Council meeting, which I'm calling to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, will the clerk please do the roll?
Councilmember Kambata?
Here.
Councilmember Dennis?
Here.
Councilmember Thiede?
Here.
Councilmember Olson?
Here.
Mayor Bailey?
Here. Next on our agenda this evening is the open forum. This is the opportunity for anybody that wants to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda is welcome to do so at this time. We did have a sign-up sheet out in the entryway, but nobody did sign up, so I'm just going to look in the audience. Is there anybody that wants to speak on open forum? Nobody? All right. We'll go ahead and close open forum. We'll move to 5, which is adoption of the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Dennis, second by Councilmember Thiede. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 6 is presentations. We do not have none this evening. 7 is consent calendar. Is there anything council would like to pull on consent? Councilmember Olson.
Item H, please.
Item H. And I will just mention that we are going to pull items B and C for a separate vote, which we'll explain a little bit later why we're just doing that separately. Anything else, council? All right, so let's go ahead then and go to Councilmember Olson. H is a grant that you want to recognize.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I did want to recognize this 2022 Assistance to Firefighters, Fire Prevention and Safety Grant, which the City of Cottage Grove received from FEMA in the amount of $124,022, which I'm sure will go to good use. I was hoping that our Director of Public Safety, Pete Kerner, would take a minute and tell us a little bit more about how this grant came to be and what exactly we may use it for. Or I see you have several members of the fire department here as well. So if you wanted to delegate that task, I'm sure you could do that.
I'd love to delegate that to our Deputy Chief if that would come up with them too.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Kerner, Mayor Bailey, Council. We're very proud of the award from FEMA that they awarded us this past week for over $124,000. Researching just how successful folks are for this grant, we found out this is probably only one of 100 awards nationwide, so we're incredibly privileged to be able to use this. The grant will be used for a very common request we get out through the community is for smoke alarm installation and carbon monoxide installation. It will also allow us to use staff off shift and pay those labor hours so we can kind of take that burden off our on-shift staff to do some fire prevention, intervention, and education. And then just another thanks to the council for, first of all, allowing us to apply for this grant earlier this year. And another thanks to Representative Angie Craig, Senator Tina Smith, and Senator Amy Klobuchar. They're all part of the Congressional Fire Service Caucus, and they all work very hard to assure that we continue to get these opportunities. So thank you very much, and I can answer any questions.
Yep. Anything else?
Thank you, Deputy Chief Pritchard. I don't really have any questions, but I do want to take advantage of the opportunity of having you stand there because it's my understanding that the Cottage Grove Fire Department is going to be participating in an event for Teddy's Heart on August the 31st, which is actually the Park High School football game against Eastridge. Could you tell us a little bit about that since you're up there anyway?
Yes, and a very exciting thing for our community. I've been in this community as both a resident for about 3 years now, so learning about how important Park High School football is to our community. It's actually the season opener for Park versus Eastridge, which I heard is a first that they played in a few years, is that we'll be joining Teddy's Heart at the Twin Cities Orthopedic Center where the Vikings have all their facilities, and we'll be there with Teddy's Heart at the football game to teach CPR to people in attendance and promote AED placement and learning those life-saving skills to save folks that might have a sudden cardiac arrest.
Yeah, it's quite an honor for us to be invited to come out to the Vikings facility to actually attend that event, and You know, I know you guys are going to be doing quite a bit of training and stuff too, so since you were there, I thought I would just give you a moment to plug that, and thank you guys very much for participating in that. All of us up here are such huge supporters of Teddy's Heart, and I know that they're working very, very hard on their fundraising and making sure that they are getting those AEDs out and teaching those life-saving skills, so thank you. That's it for me, Mayor.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Olson, for bringing that up. Just a side note, because I did happen to find out, the reason that they're having it out there at the Vikings training facility is the East Ridge's new field is not ready yet. And they didn't, of course, want to play at Park, so they picked this off-site premise.
So here I
that's-
thought it was because Nick Aragoni was gonna be there and the crowd was gonna be so
Well, we
big.
are gonna
They
have
couldn't
Nick
manage it.
in
Yeah.
his purple and gold. and-
Okay, perfect. Yeah, Park High
So,
Royalty.
but
Nick
that's all
Aragoni.
good, that's all good. We're glad to be there. All right, since nothing else was pulled, and again, what I'll look for is a motion to approve consent minus B and C, which would be a separate
So moved.
vote. So we have a motion.
Second?
We had a motion by Councilmember Wilson, second by Councilmember Kambata. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. And the other two items, which is B and C, one is a tobacco license and a liquor license for what could be a new business called Wine, Bourbon, and More in both places. And the reason we're pulling this for a separate vote is, as everybody was or may be aware, Councilmember Dennis did operate a business in this location at one point, and there's a new business looking to go in there. And so he is recusing himself from this vote, and so that the rest of us can vote on it, just to be clean and clear. Even though his business is closed, it's just, do you want to say?
I'm still the owner of
Yes.
note legally, but to avoid any potential where people would.
Being right, yep.
Yeah,
It's
so
all
we'll
good.
do the right thing. So I'll kindly recuse myself with your permission.
You got it, okay? So, council, I'll look for a motion and a second if you want to do both. Can we do both of them together? I think we can we? Who would like to take the
can we-
motion? It's B and C and consent.
Can we ask some questions about it?
Sure, well, let's do a motion and a second, and then.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve items B and C, the tobacco license and the liquor license, pending proof of lease agreement for a potential business named Wine, Bourbon, and More.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I would second that.
Second by Councilmember Kambata. Further discussion, Councilmember Thede, you had a question?
Okay, and I guess that's what I was asking, that in terms of pending proof of lease agreement, because I just had heard, but, I guess that'll be okay, because then if they don't get they don't get the lease, then they don't get the
Then they
license.
don't, yeah, it goes with the place. And since we don't have another meeting until like what's the date, 6th of September, I think if I heard right, and I can look at staff if they know this or not, the lease may be starting like September 1st. And so they would not be able to operate their business without these two licenses if they start operating the business as of September 1st. So that's why it's contingent on their ability to get the lease on that spot. Okay, was that answer?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And
Oh,
just
Councilmember Kamada.
as a quick aside, as somebody wanting to go in there, they would want to have, the two things are contingent on each other. They wouldn't want to sign a lease without having the city approval. And so that's why these things have to run concurrently.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor, council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So if anybody was here for anything that was on this evening's consent calendar, all of those items have been approved. The next item is 8, which is a approved disbursement. 8A is to pay the bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
We have a motion by Councilmember Dennis. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Councilmember Olson. Any discussion on the bills? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. 9 is a public hearing. We do have one this evening. It is Adult Use Cannabis Regulation Moratorium. And our city attorney, Corey Land, is actually going to walk us through this. Council, we've had this workshop about a week, 2 weeks ago, week ago. It's all blending now. And we're kind of following suit with most cities, it sounds like, within the city. So I'll turn it, or in the state, I should say. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. As we've had several discussions, the legislature passed a 320-page bill approving adult use cannabis, and in it are a lot of regulations, a lot of opportunities for the city, and some things that will not occur immediately. And so there, as you indicated, there's a lot of cities that are doing this right now, adopting an interim ordinance, what's called a moratorium on new cannabis businesses. Also, the legislation has some issues or some authority to adopt a penalty for public use. And there's, again, an issue that's sort of an open-ended question on a penalty for underage use. So those are the three topics I'd like to cover briefly tonight. As you know, in 2022, so let's go back in time a year ago, the legislature approved the CBD version, the hemp-related cannabis. And it's hemp-derived products only, no more than 0.3% THC. It's called low dose or low potency. And they had a lot of restrictions around the kinds of packaging that can contain 5 milligrams per serving, 50 milligrams per package. So that was slightly amended in the new legislation. But based on the 2022 law, the city adopted some ordinances around that, authorizing the sales, both licensing and zoning. So we did adopt certain zoning restrictions on locations where these products can be sold, as well as some licensing requirements. So we do license any hemp-derived products, and they must contain less than 0.3% THC. They cannot be sold at on-sale or off-sale liquor establishments, so no liquor stores, no bars or restaurants that have an on-sale liquor license. They can't be sold by transient merchants or peddlers, and what that means is they can't be sold at your special events out of a booth. And they're only allowed in the B3, the PB, and the MU zoning districts. They are permitted uses, so they don't require any additional approvals. They're permitted, but they can only be in those zoning districts. And the city has had one business come forward and apply for a license, and they did obtain one, and they are in the mixed-use zoning district. So fast forward now to this last legislative session, they enacted adult use cannabis, as I indicated, and instead of just the hemp-derived products, they came up with 16 types of business uses. We only cover in our ordinance the hemp-derived products, so there's a bunch of other businesses out there that could be operating. The trick that the legislature hook, or I guess the hook is probably a better word, that they put on it is any products with more than 0.3% THC have to be licensed by the state. The state will not be ready to issue any licenses until they have their Office of Cannabis Management up and running, which will not occur until approximately January of 2025. So even though they have all of these different kinds of businesses that can operate, they can't technically until the state issues licenses for them. However, there are some of the hemp-related products that can be operating today, and there are other cannabis-related uses, such as products that contain probably less than 0.3% THC, but are not products yet, such as the seeds and the plants that are completely unregulated under our ordinance. So there's all of this gray area on who can do what, when, and where. And so that's why a lot of cities are adopting these moratoriums to try to call a timeout, if you will, on any new businesses trying to establish under this gray area and fit within maybe some kind of a black hole that we don't have in our ordinance. So because our ordinance is still in effect, it has not been preempted by the state because the state isn't ready to issue any licenses. So our CBD hemp-related products are still restricted in this city on how and where they can be sold. So we are recommending tonight that you hold a public hearing and adopt a moratorium on businesses other than those that are covered by our CBD ordinance. So anybody that wants to apply for a CBD license still can. They must do so pursuant to our ordinances in the zoning districts where they're allowed and under all of the conditions and restrictions that we have until the council decides to change those rules. So we are recommending a moratorium through what the legislation authorized, which is January 1st of 2025, or until you adopt ordinances that are compliant with the law, or you decide that you don't need to change anything in your ordinance, and we'll just simply slide into letting the state preempt all of this jurisdiction when they get their Office of Cannabis Management up and running. So whichever occurs first. So there's a lot of questions. That's kind of the first item for you tonight. There's a lot of question about where people can be using adult use cannabis, And the law is very, very clear on this. There are only 3 locations where adult use cannabis is authorized: private homes, private property with the permission of the owner, or any place that has a license for on-site consumption, which we know will not happen until 2025. So we're really in the first 2 categories. And there are also some very serious exceptions to where they can be used. You can't use it in the presence of children, and you can't use it where the Clean Indoor Air Act prohibits it. So there are very strict rules about where it can be used, but there are no penalties for using it anywhere. So the state did authorize cities to adopt a penalty. But before we do that, we are recommending, and I think you did this at the workshop, that this go to a joint meeting of the Public Safety Committee and the Parks Committee, and the Parks Commission, and let them sort of make a recommendation to you on where they think it's appropriate, whether or not they think it's appropriate to specifically ban the use in public places and what that means. And we've sort of defined what that can mean. Public place is a property that's generally open to the public, open to or accessible by the public, including public property, and then public property is property owned by the city. So that can be anything from parks, your buildings, your parking lots, your rights of way, whether that be a trail, street, sidewalk. So that's kind of the general direction that we, will be throwing at that commission, joint commission meeting, to let them decide what they think is a good recommendation for you. So that isn't anything you need to decide today, but just wanted to let you know that meeting is scheduled for September 11th. And then finally, the last sort of gray area that the legislature left is this adult use cannabis is prohibited if you are under the age of 21. So no one can use it, buy it, sell it if they are under the age of 21. But again, there's no penalty in the law. So this is something I would like to open up to the council for some discussion. Simply, it's similar to underage consumption of alcohol. However, in state law, there's a penalty for that. They didn't impose a penalty for this. So this is just some language that I had seen another city draft, and I felt like it was appropriate. So it would be a petty misdemeanor, similar to what we're talking about if there's adult use cannabis. Somebody that uses it in public places, the penalty is a petty. So I think for this, it could also be a petty, but then you need to determine what's the appropriate fine for that petty misdemeanor, and it can be up to $300, but my guess is it would be something less than that. It's more of trying to deter people from using it underage, as opposed to seriously financially penalizing them. So that is for a discussion item tonight. I'd like to gauge the council's interest on whether or not you'd like me to draft this ordinance. We could bring it forward after the Parks Commission and the Public Safety Committee make their recommendation to you and have them sync up at whatever meeting we determine is appropriate for that. So recommendation of the public use ordinance is we have a recommendation from the joint meeting. Underage use ordinance, I would like to ask the council to discuss it and then discuss what the appropriate fine would be. And then finally, the next slide is that we will hold the public hearing on the interim ordinance. So if you wouldn't mind, Your Honor, I would like to ask for your discussion on this item.
Absolutely. So, Council, I know we did have some conversations in a workshop session a week or two ago. What is Council's thoughts on this? Councilmember Olson, you want to start?
I will, thank you. Good information here that encapsulated a good portion of our discussion from the workshop. So thank you, Corey, for bringing this forward to us. I very much appreciate the consideration given to the Public Services Commission and to the Parks Commission. I think that when you look at what their purview is and the role that they play as advisory commissions in the city, this is exactly the sort of topic where we as a council would very much appreciate their input and their advice. My personal opinion is that their input and advice on the underage use ordinance and potential penalties should coincide with the other conversation that they're going to have. I would prefer to hear from the two commissions as to their thoughts on this. And part of the reason for that is, when I think about underage use and controlled substances, I have a hard time reconciling, the difference between alcohol, tobacco, and now this new legislation. And tobacco use, I think, is permitted at age 18 or above, and alcohol use is 21, is that right?
It's 21 now.
It is 21 for tobacco, so there's a consistency there. Okay, good. That helps me. I appreciate that. I am not a smoker, and I don't live with any smokers, and I don't sell cigarettes at my business. So that is really good news. That being said, I think the idea that's presented about the petty misdemeanor as a deterrent, as a way to hopefully change people's behavior, certainly is logical, it's rational, it's reasonable. But just from where I sit, I'd like the buy-in of the commissions on that as well first. And it's not that much of a time gap where, it's going to make a huge difference whether we implement something now or, 3 weeks from now.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Olson. Councilmember Thede, any thoughts?
I would agree with that. So,
Okay. Good with that. Councilmember Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor. I would go with the recommendation from the attorney to put the moratorium on so that facts can be determined and do it in a reasonable way. I think the penalty should be consistent with alcohol because it's an altering substance, I guess, if you will. And as far as appropriate fine, we can take that under advisement, take a look at what some other organization or other cities are doing. I think it's reasonable at this point to try to be as much in line with what other cities are doing. I know many times we like to be, cutting edge, but not bleeding edge, right? So I think it would be wise for us to follow in the steps of what most other cities are doing.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Councilmember Kabata?
I'm in favor of implementing a moratorium. My question for the moratorium is, if we implement the moratorium, can we still implement the underage use ordinance?
Your Honor, members of the council, they are completely separate issues. So the moratorium is strictly on licenses and businesses and whether they can operate. The underage use is really targeting people that are using the product, however they obtained it, because technically they
Because they
can't
can't
buy
buy
it. They can grow it at this point, but they can't buy it.
But, and then, yeah, in terms of imposing the penalty, I think in keeping in step with the underage consumption of alcohol is a good measure. As far as the fine, I would defer to whatever the monetary value of the fine for, underage consumption of alcohol is, if we're considering the things to be similar in their severity. However, I would be curious to see what the input is from the commissions regarding the efficacy of the underage drinking fine and penalty, if that's been an effective deterrent, or, if the fine needs to be higher, or if the fine is too high and it's, causing an unnecessary burden to those who are, being cited. If the fine is too high, if it's too low, and kind of bringing everything into a consistent level of enforcement.
Okay. Councilmember Olson, you had something else you want to add?
Yeah, I did. Thank you very much, and I appreciate my colleague, Councilmember Dennis, making the comment about, cutting edge, but not necessarily always leading edge. I think that's a really wise way to pursue this, is to ascertain and benchmark what other communities are doing. And so as part of that, I was going to ask if there has been any clear direction given by the league at this point on this legislation. I suspect I know the answer, but I wanted to ask anyway.
Yeah, Your Honor, members of the council, there's nothing clear about anything in this legislation other than there's going to be more discussion.
Right.
But they did point out this issue at the legislative update that I attended in June, that there's no penalty for underage use. And so they did indicate that we should bring it up to our councils to see how, as you as policymakers, whether or not this is something you want to impose. Keeping in mind, as I said, with the use in public, all we can do is wag our finger at people and ask them to stop unless you have a penalty that you can actually impose. So whether we impose it or not, obviously is discretionary on the officers, but it does at least give them something to impose as opposed to just saying, please stop.
And you're referencing this as a criminal act versus a civil, right?
Correct, it's a crime.
Okay. And the reason I asked the question about the league is, it's pretty illuminating that the legislature gave themselves some wiggle room until the 1st of January in 2025, because as with lots of legislation that comes down the pipeline, sometimes there's that unintended consequence that people just don't see or they don't anticipate. And so they gave themselves some time to make some adjustments in the next legislative session. And I would guess that the league is going to have something to say about that through their lobbying and probably Metro Cities and several other organizations. And I would certainly recommend that as we move forward, that we continue to engage with our legislative contingent at the state to make sure that they clearly understand what our hopes and dreams are as it relates to this particular piece of legislation, because it's already put us in a little bit of a weird space.
So, Your Honor, if I could just go to the last slide, which is, this is an interim ordinance. The legislation does require that you hold a public hearing before you can adopt it, so it was published appropriately. So I ask that you hold the public hearing, if there's any testimony from the public, and then I would recommend that you adopt the ordinance that we've included in the packet.
Okay. One of the things I'd like to ask, though, real quick, and by the way, I concur with what my colleagues were saying. The intent, though, with the two commissions getting together and coming up with the idea of mainly within parks and open spaces, correct? So you talked about on here putting a fine towards underage consumption. That would be similar, and I agree with my colleagues here on that. So is it also our intent that depending on what they come back with as a recommendation, that if somebody is smoking, let's say they come back and say nothing in the parks, you can't do it in the parks, you can't do open space. If somebody's doing it, there would be a possible fine attached to that too, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And Councilmember Olson, I did misspeak a little bit. It's not a crime because it's a petty misdemeanor.
Right.
It's an
But
offense.
it's a criminal
But it goes
proceeding.
to criminal court.
Right, that's what I meant,
Yes.
thank you.
The other thing, and I'll just throw this out there because, I'll open the public hearing here in a second. I, by chance, had, before coming in here tonight, there's some, again, more confusion out there that somewhere supposedly in the state's constitution, it states that if you are an individual and you decide you want to, I don't know what's going on with our speakers, if you want to grow it and you want to sell it, according to the Constitution, that's approved. So I'm sure you will have to deal with that at some point in time, but I did find it interesting that question was asked of the governor, and the governor said, probably for this year, for like 25 years going ahead, they're going to have to tweak it every single year, is what he said in a press conference earlier today. And but the belief is that it is not allowed that you can grow and sell your own, even though you're not a business without a license. So I just want to mention that. I saw that on the news before I came in. So, all right. So any other comments before I open the public hearing? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this particular topic? Just a few of you.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Matter, 6649 Inskip Avenue South, Cottage Grove.
Thank you.
And Mayor, Commissioners, thank you very much. All I'd like to say is this. I guess I'd like to know what Washington County is doing, if they have any plans, because they have the park here. And so I guess whatever they would say, I would hope we're consistent. That's number one. Number two, I'm concerned about making a kid be a criminal, and if there was a way that they could do community service and it not go on their long-term record, I think that that might be the way to do it. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Two things I can answer, maybe both. One regarding the fine or whatever. I do know that with underage situations, and I only know this because I'm part of the Youth Service Bureau, as I'm looking at our Director of Public Safety back there is the opportunity for diversion. So it's both teaching them why it's not good to do that, but also doing some type of community service. So that is something that we work with all of our local police departments and Washington County. With regards to Washington County at this moment, I did happen to talk to our county commissioner, Carla Bingham, and basically at the moment, what the county is going to do is whatever the cities decide for even this temporary situation, they will follow the lead of that particular city. So, if, for example, to your point, if the Ravine Park is in Cottage, which it is, whatever we end up passing will be the rules for that park. The county doesn't supersede us. So they're going to do that with everyone. We talked about Lake Elmo Park, St. Croix Bluffs. I mean, I spoke with her specifically about all the different parks and such and open space that they have for the county. So they're going to follow the city's leads. Okay. Anybody else that want to speak on this topic? All right, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And council, before us, you do have a bullet point for recommendation and a second.
I would move that we adopt an interim ordinance prohibiting the establishment of adult-use cannabis businesses and the establishment of unlicensed CBD businesses.
It was a little different than the one that you have on the screen, but it covers it.
Oh, I've read
You're
it
fine,
on the
you're
back.
fine. I think it's off the packet. So we have a motion by Councilmember Thede. Do I have a second?
I would second that.
All right, seconded by Councilmember Kambata. Council, any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you. All right, next, 10 is bid awards. There are none this evening. 11 is a regular agenda. We do have one item on a regular agenda this evening, and that is a zoning definition, text amendment, and the keeping of bees ordinance. And Connor Jakes, our associate planner, is going to walk us through this, so welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's great to be with you this evening. Before you tonight are two text amendments. One is a text amendment to the agricultural use livestock definition, and one is a text amendment to allow for the keeping of bees on residential and agricultural properties. A little background on the proposals before you tonight. The city's 2040 comprehensive plan does state that the city should investigate the policy and ordinance opportunities for residential animal keeping to promote healthy food at home. You recall in 2022, you adopted an ordinance that allowed for the keeping of chickens and ducks on both residential and agricultural properties throughout the community, which made great strides towards the achievement of this goal. However, recently you directed staff to conduct additional research related to ordinance opportunities for the keeping of bees on both residential and agricultural properties to further meet this goal, which is why the two proposals are before you tonight. I would note that the agricultural use definition is within Title 11, which is the zoning code, the zoning title of the city code. Staff is proposing to delete both bees and honey from this definition, so there's no contradictions with the proposed keeping of bees ordinance. That specific ordinance would then be placed within Title 5, more specifically Section 4, which is the animal control section, which is where all the city's specific animal-related ordinances are placed, as well as that recent chicken and duck ordinance from 2022. So the proposed agricultural use definition is on screen before you. Again, staff is just proposing to delete both bees and honey from this definition. I will note that at the Planning Commission meeting, they made a recommendation to also delete chickens from this current definition. However, with further discussion from the city attorney, the recommendation is just to delete bees and honeys, as chickens should be allowed agricultural use within residential districts. Moving into the keeping of bees ordinance and specifics of the proposed ordinance, if you were to apply to keep bees on your property, you'd be required to apply for a permit. That permit would be valid for a period of 2 years. and it would be non-transferable, meaning that permit is not transferable between property owners, and it does not run with the land. The city clerk would be the issuing body of those permits, and they would be done administratively. It would follow the same or similar process as the chicken and duck permits that are currently being issued by the city clerk. Also note that an inspection would be required with the initial permit application. If that property owner receives that initial permit, that inspection would be conducted and approved. If they applied for a second, third, fourth, et cetera permit, there wouldn't be an inspection required. However, the proposed ordinance would allow the city to conduct an inspection under any circumstances, including if there's a complaint for whatever reason relating to the keeping of bees. And sales of products are also allowed pursuant to City Code Title 1143, which is the home occupation section of the city code. In terms of where the keeping of bees would be allowed, the ordinance proposes that the allowable lots are agricultural lots and single-family residential lots, zoned R1 through R4. I just wanted to note that the R4 district is our new transitional zoning district, which allows for both townhomes as well as single-family lots. So within this R4 district, only the single-family lots would be permitted to keep bees. A good example of this would be the currently under construction Hinton Woods development that has both townhomes and single-family lots. Only the single-family lots within that development would be allowed to keep bees. Continuing with more specifics of the ordinance, colony density is called out specifically. 2 colonies for 1/2 acre lot or less would be permitted. A good example is on screen before you in the top right. 1 colony lives within 1 hive. So the hive is here, and as well as the lower image. So by requiring a limit on the colonies, we're requiring or putting a maximum on the number of hives that would be on a lot. And then as your lot size increases, you're allowed more colonies on that property. In addition to colony density requirements, location requirements are also provided. The colony must be located in the rear yard, not adjacent to the street. Must be set back 10 feet from any property line and 25 feet from any residence, both on the lot or any adjacent lots. And in addition, fencing would be required around the hives to deter any unauthorized access. If a property has an existing perimeter fence that basically encloses the property, that would be sufficient for meeting the intent of the ordinance. In addition to location and density requirements, there are also maintenance requirements. The colonies must be kept in hives with removable frames, and those hives must be kept in sound and good condition. A convenient water source must be immediately available for the colonies, and all beekeeping equipment and other materials must be placed within a building or a vermin-proof container. In addition, that beekeeping equipment must be kept in good condition, and any unused equipment would have to be stored in an area that's secure from the weather. And with that, I'll leave the 2 recommendations on screen before you. Staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would just mention, good job to our staff for kind of working. I know we had one particular citizen that provided us with lots of data from other communities that are approving bees, so it was great, and I'm sure he's going to be excited along with the different partners, you know, should we pass this evening. Council, any questions for staff at this point? Yeah, Councilmember Thiede.
Yeah, at what point do we, in terms of administrating this, and if we start getting if a lot of people want to do this, and we start getting a lot of calls of bees, you know, problems and things like that, who's taking care of that?
Mayor, members of the council, currently under this, the city clerk is the one who is the licensing authority on that. She would be collecting any nuisance complaints and then working with code enforcement in regards to those and investigating them.
I was trying to remember from some of that other information what there was relative to things like complaints and that from other adjacent homeowners, neighbors, and things like that.
The one that's coming to mind, I think, was Stillwater, and I think when that gentleman sent us the data, I mean, it was straightforward with it. I think there was 2 complaints, but it was over a 2-year period. Do you remember that at all, or no?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I believe it was. Staff did contact the Stillwater planners and staff there, and I believe both of those complaints were relating to not obtaining a permit, and then those property owners did go forth and get the permit. So that was the complaints there, and they were resolved by obtaining a permit. So.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, Councilmember Kambata.
When you were speaking to the Stillwater planners and city staff, did they give any indication of approximately how many permits they issue for this type of activity?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Kambata, in talking with Stillwater, I believe they've issued 12 permits over the last 13 years since they adopted the B ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. All right, seeing no other questions, we have two separate motions before us. If council would like to move forward with one of them, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll move that we adopt ordinance 1068, amending the agricultural use definition in City Code Title 11-1-3.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Olson. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilmember Kambata. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. And then number two.
I would move to adopt ordinance number 1076, enacting City Code Title 5-4-14, allowing the keeping of bees on agricultural, AG1, AG2, and single-family R1, R2, R3, R4 lots.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Kambata. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Olson. Again, any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I certainly don't want to impinge upon anybody's rights to use their property in a fashion that they would like to do. I've also had a number of individuals reach out to me with concerns, people especially that have allergies to bees. And so I'm going to choose not to support this by virtue of the fact that putting a fence up isn't going to keep bees from flying across the property line or from stinging someone and then having that person potentially go into shock and perish. I know it could happen just being out in the yard anyhow, but I think there needs to be a voice for those people who are concerned about that issue as well.
Okay. All right. Any other comments?
I guess I'd probably have a little bit of a concern too on smaller lots. The thing that pops into my mind, I'm trying to take a look at that 25 feet from a residence and 10 feet from a property line and kind of get a visual of how small a lot could actually have, the bees on it. I can see, some bigger lots. I would think that it should, actually, I would think it should be more than that. Usually when you see bees, they're kind of, a big open spot, So I'm real hesitant myself also.
Okay. Well, I will just mention that two things. One is we kind of went through this same process when we were talking about chickens and ducks, how far distance should be from the property line, how big are the lots. I guess I was going to ask, it would be something for a future update to the council, but how many actual chicken permits, if you will, or duck permits have actually been requested within the city? It'd be kind of interesting to know. I don't believe that we've had any complaints that I'm aware of anyway at this point. The second thing is, and though I do totally understand the concerns that some people may have regarding bees, but I also know that there's people allergic to ducks, there's people allergic to cats and dogs, and so you have to just kind of look at what's the majority or what's the best for the majority, and that's how kind of I'm looking at it in this case. Am I going to put bees in my backyard? No, and nor am I doing chickens and ducks. But in this particular case, I think there's a similarity between the two. Yes, Councilmember Thiede.
So if we go ahead and approve this and find that we're having issues with small lots or certain size lots, we can certainly revisit it and change it to larger lots, correct? All right.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Yeah, Councilmember Kambata.
Just in keeping with Councilmember Thiede's question, the way I interpreted the ordinance is anything less than a half acre would be ineligible. Is that accurate? It said two hives per half acre.
Councilmember Kambata, a half-acre lot or less would be
Or
allowed for
less,
2
okay.
colonies.
Yeah, I
Yep.
saw that. Okay.
Okay. All right, seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you. All right, we are now down to council comments and requests. Thank you, Connor. I'll start with Councilmember Kambata.
I will cede my time tonight.
Ooh, okay. Now we're going to move on to Councilmember Dennis.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to share with the rest of the council what you already know, and that is that I will not be attending the workshop tonight. I do, however, want to make sure that my 20% of the vote is represented, and I'll do it as following. We certified earlier this year, through a multi-step process, a financial management plan. The financial management plan was something that was absolutely instrumental in us achieving our AAA bond rating. Therefore, it carries a lot of weight and is a very important consideration relative to how we run our finances. I have no issues relative to anything that's being asked for or sought by the staff, tools, staff members, et cetera, that are necessary to effectively run a high-quality level of business for people and do it in a way that people are happy getting that service. So just for my 20%, I do support what's being asked for, but will unfortunately not be able to be in the room tonight.
Okay, sounds good. Councilmember Thiede.
Well, I guess one of the things that I would mention is that August 22nd, there's a Cable Commission, the SWCTC, is having a 40th anniversary party. It's a party. And just kind of going to be going over some different history and things of that nature, and showing off some of their equipment and everything. It's over at the cable offices, and that's at 6939 Pine Arbor Drive, kind of right there next to Junction 70. And so that's August 22nd, and it's from 4 to 8 p.m. So be there.
Be there. Yep, that'll be good. Councilmember Rolson? Nothing? All right, I have two things, well, one thing now real quick. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be at that event because I'll be out of town on business, but we do appreciate, obviously, the SWCTC group, and obviously they're televising us right now, so we do appreciate all the work they're doing and want to congratulate them on their 40th anniversary. The other thing I thought I would just share real quick, it's kind of neat. I did receive a letter today from the League of Minnesota Cities, and I will just basically mention that they are recognizing our local Senator Matt Klein, which they call the actual term that they use is selected as a League of Minnesota Cities Legislator of Distinction for 2023. And basically, the League Board of Directors recognizes a total of 35 legislators this year, including 20 House members and 15 senators. And the purpose of recognizing them this way is for their actions and leaderships on a wide variety of legislative issues of importance to cities across the state. And so they're going to be sending out a press release, and obviously us as a city, I think we'll send a letter to Senator Matt Klein, thanking him for his contributions to all the success that he has helped with our city, as well as the, I believe there's 838 member cities for the League of Minnesota Cities, and look forward to continuing to work with him in the future. So that is it on my notes. For the public, there is a workshop session, which Councilmember Dennis had just mentioned earlier, which is open to the public, and it is our CIP workshop. And then after that, there is not a workshop that is closed to the public, so we are going to be moving into are we going to the training room here at City Hall. So if you're watching on TV, have a good evening.